Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rebecca Payne. Rebecca Charlotte Payne was born on April 19, 1986 in New Milford, Connecticut, to Virginia and Nicholas Payne. She grew up as an only child and graduated from New Milford High School in 2004, where she was active in sports, playing field hockey, track, and tennis. After high school, Rebecca pursued a degree in athletic training at Northeastern University in Boston. The 5-year program focused on preventing and treating athletic injuries. During her 4th year, she became a leader on campus, serving on the Dean's Council and as president of the athletic training club. Rebecca was known for her friendly and outgoing personality, making it easy for her to connect with people from all walks of life. She was always willing to lend a helping hand, which earned her many friends. Her life was tragically cut short when she was found dead in May 2008. The news shocked her friends and left them wondering who could have committed such a heinous crime. The police investigation revealed that there were no signs of forced entry at her home, suggesting that Rebecca may have known her killer and possibly let them in voluntarily. Rebecca's apartment, situated on the 3rd floor, consisted of 2 bedrooms. One of these rooms was where Rebecca lay face down on the floor, lifeless. The trail of blood leading from the living room to this bedroom suggested that the attack had occurred in the living room. This theory was later confirmed by forensic experts, who found casings at the scene and determined that Rebecca had been shot 5 times. The bloodstains in the apartment indicated that Rebecca was initially conscious and managed to crawl to the bedroom, but her strength eventually gave out. The detective's task was to identify the person responsible for such brutality. They quickly ruled out the possibility of a theft gone wrong, as Rebecca's valuables remained untouched. The apartment was in disarray, with scattered belongings. However, the detectives suspected that the perpetrator intentionally created this mess to mislead them. Alternatively, the mess could have been a result of Rebecca's struggle to resist her attacker. During the investigation, officers noticed that both the balcony door and the front door were open. Furthermore, signs in the 2nd bedroom indicated that someone else had lived there. After speaking with the apartment manager, they discovered Rebecca didn't live alone, but shared an apartment with a fellow student. This new information led the police to search for the student. The police also questioned everyone living in Parker Hill Apartments, trying to find any leads. The attack on Rebecca was loud and brutal, with 5 gunshot wounds. It was surprising that many residents heard a woman screaming and gunshots between 3 and 4 a.m., but none of them called the police. This lack of action is known as the bystander effect, or Genovese syndrome, a psychological phenomenon where individuals are less likely to help a victim when others are present. During the police investigation, a 1st-floor resident reported seeing a black SUV approach the building on the night of the crime, although he couldn't see the license plates or who got out due to the darkness. The apartment complex had security cameras both inside and outside, which may have captured evidence of the crime. Investigating Rebecca's murder, detectives sought CCTV footage from the building to aid their inquiry. They requested the footage from the building manager, but he revealed that the cameras only operated in real time, and recording required a video cassette and manual activation. Unfortunately, no one had recorded the footage. This discovery led investigators to suspect the building manager, who had found Rebecca's body and had unrestricted access to her apartment as a resident of the building. They thought he might have taken advantage of the lack of surveillance to commit the crime, possibly under the cover of darkness. The police explored all avenues, and their suspicions about the manager intensified after a background check revealed his prior issues with the law related to illegal substances. Furthermore, another detail caught the police's attention. During their investigation, the police noticed dark red stains on the front door of the apartment complex manager's apartment. They collected a sample of the stain and sent it to the lab for analysis. Meanwhile, the manager was taken in for questioning at the police station. The investigators asked him numerous questions, trying to determine if he was hiding any information or if his story would change, but he denied any involvement in Rebecca Payne's death. The manager claimed he had spent the entire night in his apartment with his wife, and she corroborated his alibi when questioned by the police. However, the investigation was put on hold until the lab results came back. Once the report confirmed that the stains on the door were just paint, the manager was released due to lack of evidence. While reviewing video and photo evidence from the crime scene, detectives became interested in a specific card used to pay for public transportation in the Boston area. Since each use of the card was recorded in the system, including the location and time of use, the transit police provided the detectives with CCTV footage related to Rebecca's case. After examining the recordings, detectives discovered that the card had been used by Rebecca. Rebecca was walking home, calm and alone, with no one following her, so the initial footage didn't provide any leads in the case. A few days later, investigators obtained another surveillance video from a camera outside the hospital near the Parker Hill apartments. This recording showed a black SUV driving by at the same time as Rebecca's attack, matching the witness's description. Although the footage was poor quality and the license plate was not visible, they were able to identify the car as a Ford. The detectives then brought Rebecca's roommate in for questioning to determine if she had any connection to the incident. The woman was shocked by Rebecca's murder and cooperated with the investigators. She had a solid alibi, having moved in with her parents to study for an exam, which her parents confirmed. Although she was cleared of suspicion, she provided useful information. She revealed that Rebecca's boyfriend, Matt, had access to their apartment. The investigators wondered if Matt had a motive to kill Rebecca and contacted him. Matt claimed he had left Boston to live with his parents in New York State around the time of the attack. Although Matt seemed depressed by his girlfriend's death, the investigators were convinced it was an act. Matt's parents confirmed his alibi, but a phone record showed Matt had spoken to Rebecca on the phone around midnight, just hours before her death. But the investigation into Rebecca's murder hit a dead end after Matt was cleared due to cell tower evidence, placing him at his parents' house in New York State at the time of the crime. Years went by with no leads, leaving Rebecca's parents without answers about their daughter's tragic death. However, a breakthrough came in 2012 when the Boston police arrested Anthony White on drug trafficking charges. With a long prison sentence looming, White offered a deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he would reveal crucial details about the night Rebecca died. The investigators saw this as a potential break in the long-dormant case and agreed to the deal. After discussing it with the prosecutor, White recounted that on May 20th, 2008, he received a call from Cornell Smith, a fellow drug dealer and acquaintance. Smith wanted to meet up and arrived at the designated location with their mutual friend Michael Balba, who was driving a black SUV. The three of them drove to the Parker Hill apartments, where Balba parked in a spot with a clear view of the apartments. According to White, when Cornell Smith spotted Rebecca through a third-floor window, he exclaimed, "That's her." They waited for a while, watching until the lights in Rebecca's apartment went out, indicating she had likely fallen asleep. Under the cover of darkness, Smith proceeded to climb from the first-floor balcony to the second and finally to the third, where he entered through the open balcony door. Rebecca was not asleep, but rather lying on the couch in the living room when she encountered the intruder. She began screaming, and a brief struggle followed. Cornell Smith then fired 5 shots at her before fleeing the apartment through the front door and driving away. Investigators were skeptical of White's account, suspecting that he fabricated the story based on news reports to secure a lighter prison sentence. The officers were baffled by the motive behind the murder. Why would Cornell Smith kill Rebecca, who was unrelated to his world? But White's next statement shocked and disturbed them. According to White, Rebecca's death was a case of mistaken identity. On the first floor of the Parker Hill apartments lived two sisters who resembled Rebecca. These sisters, who were also illegal drug dealers, were Smith's rivals. In 2012, Cornell Smith was already serving a 12-year prison sentence for selling drugs, which he had been convicted of 2 years prior. Following White's testimony, Cornell Smith was also charged with Rebecca's murder, but he denied any involvement. Before Cornell Smith's court appearance, prosecutors were dealt a devastating blow. Their key witness, Anthony White, had died in prison. Without White's testimony, the case against Smith was in trouble, as there was no physical evidence linking him to Rebecca Payne's apartment. However, investigators had another lead, Michael Balba, who was in the car with White and Smith on the night of the crime. Detectives located Balba and discovered that he owned a black Ford Expedition SUV, which matched the vehicle caught on surveillance camera and the witness's description. Balba was arrested and taken into custody, but he denied any involvement in the case and requested a lawyer. Despite having no concrete evidence against him, investigators hoped that Balba's connection to the crime could still lead to justice for Rebecca. Investigators examined his court file related to drug trafficking. What they found was astonishing. Smith had written several letters to the judge presiding over his trial, and one of them implicated him in Rebecca's murder. In the letters, Smith portrayed himself as superior to others. Although some of the content was nonsensical, one letter stood out as crucial evidence. In it, Smith wrote about an altercation that had taken place in downtown Boston, which ultimately led to Rebecca Payne's tragic death at his hands. A fact he boldly admitted to, stating, "I, Cornell Allen Smith Sr., was responsible." It's unclear why these letters hadn't raised red flags earlier, especially since they were addressed to the judge. The letter proved that Cornell Smith was in Rebecca Payne's apartment at the time of her murder. The trial took place in 2015. Throughout the trial, the district attorney emphasized that Rebecca was an innocent victim with no connection to Smith or his accomplice, Balba. Payne expressed frustration and sadness, saying that seeing Cornell Smith, the person responsible for his daughter Rebecca's death, is a painful reminder of the tragedy and hinders their ability to move forward. Despite Smith's guilty plea and 18 to 20-year prison sentence, Payne emphasizes that nothing can change the fact that Rebecca is gone forever. The judge ordered Smith to face Rebecca's loved ones, acknowledging the immense pain he caused. Her hometown dedicated a tennis court, garden, and scholarship fund in her name to keep her memory alive. The case of Cassie Farrington. Born on December 22, 1990 in Virginia, Cassie Marie Brooks was the second oldest of 4 children to Chuck and Darlene Brooks. She excelled in school, became a member of the National Honor Society, participated in sports, and aspired to become a doctor. However, everything changed when she got pregnant at 16. She had to adjust her plans, and in 1 month, she graduated from high school, gave birth, married Bradley Farrington, and moved out of her parents' house. Years later, Cassie had a second child, but her marriage began to deteriorate. At 22, she got divorced. With her 2 children, she lived in Silver City, a town where she worked as a nurse at a local hospital and rented a place from a coworker. By the time Cassie turned 23, she had entered a new romantic relationship with a man named David Barry. He quickly formed a strong bond with her 2 children, which brought her great joy. Cassie and David took their time building a life together, and she was thrilled to report to her family and colleagues that he brought happiness and stability to both her and the kids. On March 24, 2014, Cassie phoned her parents after finishing her night shift at Silver City Hospital. During their conversation, she outlined her plan for the morning, driving home, picking up the kids, taking them to school, and then returning home to rest for a few hours before picking them up again later that day. Cassie was supposed to pick up her kids from school, but she didn't show up even after their classes had finished. School staff tried to reach her, but couldn't, so they called her parents. Her mother, Darlene, tried to call her too, but there was no answer. Darlene thought maybe Cassie had just overslept after working a night shift, so she asked Sherelle, Cassie's landlord, to check on her. Sherelle went to the house, knocked on the door, and called out Cassie's name, but got no response. She then went around to the back door, looked through the window, and saw water pouring out of the bathroom into the kitchen. Sherelle knocked on the door again, louder this time, and shouted Cassie's name, still with no response. She used her own key to unlock the door and entered the house, where she heard the sound of running water getting louder. As she walked through the wet kitchen towards the bathroom, she continued to call out Cassie's name, her voice starting to shake. When she finally saw Cassie, her worst fears were confirmed. Cassie's body lay face down in the overflowing bathtub, water still pouring out. Sherelle found her and pulled her out of the water, placing her on the floor. Unfortunately, it was too late to try CPR, her body indicating Cassie had been dead for several hours. Sherelle quickly called 911 to report the situation, and paramedics and police were dispatched to the house. She also had the difficult task of informing Cassie's parents of their daughter's passing. While waiting for help to arrive, Sherelle searched the house and discovered another bathtub, also overflowing with running water, suggesting a possible accident or intentional act. The tub had a feature to prevent overflow, so the extra water flowed into the drain instead of spilling onto the floor. Sherelle noticed that the towel rack, which was previously mounted on the wall, was now lying on the floor, having been torn off. Meanwhile, Chuck and Darlene, who lived in Arizona, immediately dropped everything and traveled to Silver City after receiving the news. A couple of hours after receiving the devastating news, Cassie's parents arrived at the house where her body had been found. The police were already on the scene, and they noticed that there was no evidence of break-in. The doors and windows were locked, and the glass was intact. Additionally, valuable items that might have attracted a thief were left untouched. The police chief's first question to Cassie's parents was whether their daughter had been suicidal or had any reason to take her own life. Cassie's parents, Chuck and Darlene, were adamant that their daughter would never do such a thing, especially not with young children depending on her. Despite their protestations, the police chief repeated his suggestion that Cassie's death was likely a deliberate act. The police investigation was remarkably brief, lasting only a few hours, which struck Cassie's parents as unusual. Typically, the police take days to thoroughly examine the scene of a tragedy. In this case, they seemed eager to wrap things up quickly, even telling Sherelle that she could reuse the house soon. This hasty approach only added to Cassie's parents' growing unease, prompting them to decide to investigate the house themselves. When Cassie's parents drained the bathtub, they were surprised to find water still in it. They also discovered a series of black streaks on the tub's sides, similar to the marks left by rubber-soled shoes on the floor in various areas. Additionally, they found Cassie's glasses, hairband, and a coat hanger. Given these discoveries and the lack of fingerprint evidence collected by the police, Chuck and Darlene suspected that the authorities might be trying to quickly close Cassie's case as non-criminal. However, a call to the district attorney's office prompted the police to appear more diligent in their investigation. The medical examiner's report ultimately prevented the case from being closed. It revealed that Cassie's body had multiple bruises, including those on her neck. The forensic medical examiner concluded that her death was a homicide caused by an unspecified mechanism of injury. Unfortunately, the crime scene was no longer of significant use due to the property owner's subsequent cleanup and renovations. As a result, the police were unable to uncover new leads, leaving Cassie's parents with no updates on the case for months. David Barry, who had been in contact with Cassie before her death, was quickly cleared as a suspect due to his solid alibi. As time went on, Cassie's parents, Chuck and Darlene, grew increasingly frustrated with the local police, feeling they were not doing enough to investigate their daughter's death. After meeting with the chief district attorney, Chuck and Darlene requested that action be taken against Detective Jose Sanchez, who was handling the case. The district attorney reviewed the case file and agreed that Sanchez had made several mistakes. As a result, Sanchez was removed from the case and a more experienced detective was assigned. The new detective focused on the person Cassie's family and close friends had suspected from the start, her ex-husband, Bradley Farrington. Cassie and Bradley were in a bitter dispute over their children's custody at the time of her death. Given the court's likely ruling, it's probable that the children would have remained with their mother. Bradley stood to gain the most from Cassie's death, as it would grant him custody of the children and release him from his child support obligations. Bradley Farrington became a suspect in Cassie's death investigation. Having quit the force just months prior, Bradley had a motive for the crime. Moreover, his law enforcement background gave him the necessary expertise to manipulate the investigation and conceal evidence. Unfortunately, the bathwater had erased any potential DNA evidence and destroyed the shoe prints on the floor. Any incriminating evidence that may have linked Bradley Farrington to the crime scene was irreparably lost due to the incompetence of the local police. The only remaining option to hold Bradley accountable was through eyewitness accounts. Cassie told her parents that Bradley had often been abusive to her and the children, and that he had even mocked her, suggesting she try to report him to the police. As a Silver City police officer at the time, he felt invincible and above the law. It's heartbreaking to imagine Cassie's desperation, knowing she couldn't seek help from the police because her abusive husband's friends were part of the force. At her workplace, she confided in coworkers about Bradley's threats, including his chilling warning that he would make her disappear and no one would ever know. But in the end, 19 months later, on October 23, 2015, Bradley Farrington was arrested and charged in connection with her death. Bradley stood trial for Cassie's murder. At the trial, the prosecution presented multiple witnesses, including Cassie's parents, friends, and coworkers, who all testified about the abuse Cassie had suffered at the hands of her police officer husband. Additionally, Dr. Michael Hunter, a leading forensic expert from San Francisco, testified, assessing the conclusions drawn by local experts. Hunter, an experienced professional with over 20 years in his field, presented autopsy photographs to the jury and concluded that Cassie's neck injuries suggested she was likely strangled to death. Former Detective Sanchez, who initially handled the case before retiring, was subpoenaed to testify in court. He stated that he never considered Bradley Farrington a suspect during the initial investigation, as there was no evidence to warrant it. Sanchez also revealed that no fingerprints were collected from the crime scene. Sanchez expressed his suspicion that the crime scene had been intentionally cleaned up after the fact, which would explain why no fingerprints were found. After deliberating for 4.5 hours, the jury found Bradley Farrington guilty on September 7, 2018, and sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 30 years. In 2020, Farrington appealed his conviction to the New Mexico Supreme Court. He argued that the trial court had improperly allowed friends, family members, and co-workers of the victim to testify about statements Cassie made regarding his threats and acts of domestic violence. The state's highest court has upheld Bradley's conviction, ruling that there was sufficient evidence to support it. The court also rejected Bradley's appeal against the hearsay testimony that was allowed during his trial. Bradley is currently serving his sentence in prison. His children are now in the care of his parents, who are restricting their contact with the family of the victim. The case of Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak. Matthew Patrick, also known as Matt Pat, was born on June 10, 1975, in Ohio, USA, to Patricia Romano and Leonard Pat. During his high school years, Matthew was an active member of the hockey team. After graduating, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Following his time in the Navy, he landed a job at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. However, Matthew struggled to get along with his co-workers. According to his sister, Chrissy Duca, some colleagues were jealous of his uncle's influence and resented the fact that Matthew was being groomed to take over the business. As an outdoorsy person, Matthew enjoyed activities like boating, camping, and hunting in his free time. He also participated in softball and hockey games. In 2003, Matthew met his partner, Holly McFeature, and they started dating soon after. They moved in together in a Cleveland home and began building a life. Friends described Matthew as a happy and settled person who was eager to start a family. Within a year, they welcomed their daughter, Samantha, and 2 years later, their son, Josh. Additionally, Holly's child from a previous relationship also became part of their family. Matthew fell deeply in love with Holly, and his mother, Patricia, said he loved her with all his heart. In a short time, Matthew went from being a bachelor to a father of 3. The early years of their relationship were filled with love, passion, and mutual understanding. However, by 2005, their relationship had become argumentative and strained. Whenever Matthew and Holly had a fight, he would leave home and spend the night at a friend's house. This happened multiple times, and his friends advised him to end the relationship, suspecting that Holly was selfish and had a bad influence on him. Despite their warnings, Matthew never listened and always went back to Holly. Matthew had a life insurance policy that listed Holly as the beneficiary, but his friends cautioned him to remove her from the list. Again, Matthew ignored their advice. Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, recalled a tumultuous period in Matthew's life. During this time, Matthew's mood would swing wildly, veering from extreme happiness to anger, crying, and fear. Russell understood that Matthew was struggling with depression. Despite being initially thrilled about the prospect of raising his 3 children, Matthew's outlook was overshadowed by the volatile situation at home. Russell urged Matthew to take precautions and remove guns from the house. Later, in 2006, after the hockey season ended, Matthew began gambling online and lost a significant amount of money. His family and friends grew concerned about his well-being and noticed his depression. At their suggestion, Matthew sought medical attention and was prescribed antidepressants. However, by the spring of 2006, Matthew's health began to decline rapidly, prompting Russell to express grave concern about his physical well-being by Memorial Day weekend. Russell had asked Matthew to help him move a motor from one boat to another. However, Matthew, who was once very strong, had since gained weight and was struggling with the task. He was sweating heavily, complaining of back pain, and claimed to have lost his strength. Concerned, Russell advised Matthew to see a doctor and recommended Dr. Thomas Mandat. Matthew scheduled an appointment with Dr. Mandat for July 26, 2006. On the day of the appointment, Matthew phoned Russell to ask for directions to Dr. Mandat's office. During their conversation, Russell overheard Holly yelling at Matthew in the background, telling him he was too stupid to remember where the doctor's office was. The doctor's appointment revealed that Matthew's primary complaint was back pain. After examining him, Dr. Mandat diagnosed Matthew with kidney stones and prescribed medication to help him pass the stones and manage the associated pain. A few days later, on July 30th, Matthew called his father to share that he had bought a fishing rod for his daughter and invited him and Russell to go fishing together soon. Matthew's father said his son was looking forward to a meeting, but later that evening, Matthew attended a party with Russell Henry, who testified that Matthew was in bad physical shape. He had gained weight, was sweating heavily, and had trouble walking due to extreme back pain. After the party, Holly contacted Matthew's father, telling him she had called 911 because something was wrong with his son. The father briefly spoke to Matthew over the phone and found him confused and upset. An ambulance took Matthew to Parma General Hospital, where doctors suspected organ failure. Tests revealed that Matthew's kidneys had failed, and he had metabolic acidosis, a condition in which the blood becomes too acidic. Dr. Mandat, part of the emergency medical team, suspected that Matthew might have ingested a toxic substance like methanol or antifreeze. Holly denied that Matthew had swallowed anything harmful. Tragically, Matthew died the next day, July 31, 2006, due to kidney failure. Dr. Mandat explained that metabolic acidosis is usually caused by respiratory problems, but not in this case. He added that ethylene glycol, a toxic substance found in antifreeze, can also cause metabolic acidosis. Matthew's family and friends were devastated by his death, but Holly showed no emotional response. In fact, her friend Rebecca Vega was surprised by Holly's lack of emotions when they made funeral arrangements together. At the wake, Matthew's father had to ask Holly to enter the room where the casket was, and she seemed unbothered. Russell Henry described her as acting like nothing had happened, almost as if she was at a party. What's more, Holly's actions soon after Matthew's death raised suspicions. The day after his death, she used his bank card to withdraw money from an ATM and wrote checks in his name, emptying his bank account. Her mom reported this activity to the police, leading to Holly's arrest and charges of forgery. Holly agreed to repay the money and was placed on probation for a year. Her family claimed she was trying to get money to care for their children, but it's worth noting that Holly was also a beneficiary of Matthew's life insurance policy, although it was a small amount of $10,000. 2 weeks after Matthew's death, Rebecca Vega visited Holly and was concerned to see cleaning solvents lying around the kitchen, given the young age of the children in the home. Holly was questioned about Matthew's death. She mentioned that one of the items found was antifreeze, which Matthew used to winterize his boat. However, Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, testified that Matthew hadn't had a working boat since 2004 or 2005, when the engine failed. Michael Jama, a Cleveland police officer, had been friends with Holly since 2002. He would often visit her home, where she would babysit his children, and they would chat over coffee. To avoid interrupting her or any other man, he would call ahead. One day, when he called, Holly told him he didn't need to worry about calling ahead anymore because Matthew had passed away the previous week. Holly discussed Matthew's death in a surprisingly casual tone, mentioning that he had kidney problems and pain from playing hockey. Her casual demeanor came across as insensitive and heartless, Michael recalled. After Matthew's death, Holly removed all of his belongings from the house. She gave his computer to a friend to delete certain content, and then cut up his clothes to make a quilt, leaving his father and brother with no mementos of him. 6 weeks after Matthew's death, Holly began a romantic relationship with Charles Lipham, a police officer from Cleveland. Initially, she told Charles that her ex-boyfriend Matthew had died from kidney failure. However, she later changed her story. When the autopsy results were released in January 2007, they revealed that Matthew's body contained a large amount of ethylene glycol, a key ingredient in antifreeze. After learning this, Holly speculated to Charles that Matthew might have intentionally taken the substance to end his own life. The autopsy report revealed that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the coroner was unable to determine whether his death was intentional or accidental. Holly gave conflicting accounts of Matthew's death to different people, claiming she didn't know what antifreeze was and telling one friend that Matthew died in an industrial accident. She also suggested that a colleague might have poisoned him out of envy. However, Matthew's family suspected that the killer might be someone close to home, citing Holly's apparent lack of emotion at the funeral, despite claiming to have cried in the car beforehand. During their investigation, detectives found 2 bottles of antifreeze in the garage of Holly's home, which was documented in the police report. Holly later started dating Jameson Kennedy, a man with a criminal history and substance abuse issues, but she kept the details of Matthew's death secret from him. One night in September 2008, Holly became emotional while drinking with Jameson and began talking about Matthew, revealing previously undisclosed information. Holly broke down in tears and expressed her desire to escape her problems and leave Cleveland. she revealed her regret over a past event. When Jameson asked what was bothering her, Holly made a shocking confession. She had spiked Matthew's drinks, which eventually led to his death over time. However, Jameson wasn't convinced of her sincerity. He sought the counsel of his lawyer friend, Santiago Feliciano, and shared Holly's admission with him. Santiago advised Jameson to report the information to the authorities if he believed it to be true. Jameson then contacted Holly to discuss her confession, unaware to her that their conversation was being recorded. He hoped she would reiterate her claim about causing Matthew's death, but instead, Holly vehemently denied ever harming him. Holly denied putting anything in Matthew's drink, saying she never mentioned such a thing to Jameson. However, their relationship began to deteriorate as Jameson suspected she had cheated on him. On November 8, 2008, Jameson went to Holly's house to confront her. Feeling scared, Holly called the police. When they arrived, Jameson attacked them and was arrested for assault. He was later found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. After his arrest, Jameson told the police that Holly had confessed to him about her involvement in Matthew's death. This new information led the police to reopen the case, which had stalled since the 2007 autopsy report. The investigation was reinvigorated as more evidence pointed to Holly's involvement in Matthew's death. Dr. Galita conducted the autopsy on Matthew Pat's body. 6 months after the autopsy, Dr. Galita issued a report detailing his findings, which was co-signed by then County Coroner Dr. Elizabeth Balge. The report concluded that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the manner of death remained unknown. Dr. Galita explained that the ingested ethylene glycol entered Matthew's bloodstream and then his liver, where it was rapidly broken down by alcohol dehydrogenase. This process transformed the ethylene glycol into oxalate, which then combined with calcium to form calcium oxalate crystals. Notably, Matthew's kidneys contained an extremely large amount of these crystals. Dr. Galita's testimony revealed that Matthew's flank pain, which started on May 20, 2006, was caused by kidney crystals. During the examination, Dr. Galita found not only kidney damage, but also signs of the kidneys trying to heal. Further examination showed that Matthew had crystals in his heart and brain. Dr. Galita also diagnosed severe acute myocarditis, a heart muscle inflammation that takes at least 3 weeks to develop. Dr. Galita concluded that Matthew's death was a result of prolonged ethylene glycol intoxication, which led to a series of acute events and sublethal poisonings over a period of at least 3 months. Matthew's friends confirmed that his go-to drink was raspberry iced tea, which he would bring to work in a thermos or the original container, often a half or whole gallon jug. One friend, Michael, recalled that Holly McPhee would occasionally bring lunch to Matthew, which always included a half or whole gallon container of iced tea. During their investigation, police seized 2 bottles of antifreeze, one Peak brand, one Saturn brand, from Holly's garage in August 2007, after she had moved out. 3 years after the initial autopsy results, the report was revised in 2010. The updated report, signed by Dr. Frank Miller, the county coroner, concluded that Matthew Pat's death was caused by chronic ethylene glycol poisoning and was a homicide. Although the cause of death remained the same, the revised report changed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide. 6 years after Matthew's death, authorities finally decided to take action, charging Holly McPhee in July 2012 with aggravated deprivation of Matthew Pat's life. In 2013, Holly pleaded not guilty and faced trial. The prosecution's case relied on circumstantial evidence and featured 15 witnesses, including Matthew's family and friends, his doctor, and police officers who investigated the case. During the trial, witnesses testified about Holly's suspicious behavior, a phone call Matthew made before visiting his doctor, and the fact that Matthew hadn't owned a working boat since 2004, eliminating any need for antifreeze. Meanwhile, Holly's lawyers argued that Matthew's family and friends had prejudged her guilt and pressured law enforcement to pursue charges against her. Holly's legal team claimed that she was not responsible for Matthew's death. They suggested that Matthew was struggling with depression due to his online gambling losses, work issues, and difficulties communicating with his young child, which led him to intentionally ingest a lethal dose of antifreeze. The defense claimed Matthew died from a single dose of antifreeze, not multiple doses over time. They presented Dr. Robert Bucks, who testified that Matthew's death was due to acute poisoning, indicating a single ingestion of ethylene glycol consistent with suicide. Dr. Bucks disagreed with Dr. Galita's myocarditis diagnosis, instead believing Matthew had a heart attack. He added that myocarditis can occur independently of ethylene glycol poisoning, and flank pain isn't a typical symptom. Dr. Bucks claimed kidney stones aren't related to ethylene glycol poisoning, but the state presented contradictory evidence. Matthew struggled with depression, but was committed to being a good father. Jamison Kennedy testified that Holly confessed to mixing something into Matthew's drinks, but Holly denied it. Kennedy's credibility was questionable, but Sergeant Quinn confirmed Kennedy's statement was made when Matthew's cause of death was unknown. The jury delivered a guilty verdict on August 28, 2013, sentencing Holly to life in prison with parole possible after 30 years. The case relied on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony. The case of Amanda Anderson. Amanda Anderson was born on October 10, 1990, in Fridley, Minnesota, to Mark and Stacy Kennedy Anderson. Amanda grew up to be an aspiring writer with a passion for words, music, and life. She graduated with honors from the Tyler Gospel Chapel School in 2009 and worked at Trinity Mother Frances while attending Tyler Junior College, where she majored in English literature. On September 15, 2010, 15-year-old Nate Anderson found his sister Amanda dead on the floor with multiple bullet holes in her head after returning from a jog. He had gone out to clear his head while doing homework, but became stressed and returned to find the door kicked open. Nate immediately called 911, describing the scene without touching anything. When investigators arrived, Nate recounted the events, still shaken. The investigation revealed that Amanda was shot while sitting on her bed, causing her to fall to the floor. The killer removed shell casings, suggesting a revolver was used. Amanda's death was devastating to her parents, who were deeply religious and couldn't comprehend who would commit such a heinous act. Their daughter had just graduated from high school and was trying to find her way in life. She had no enemies and wished no one harm. The investigators canvassed the neighborhood where the crime took place, speaking with residents to gather information about Amanda and her family. Uniformly, the people they interviewed described the Andersons as a tight-knit, religious family. One neighbor offered a possible theory about Amanda's fate. He pointed out that the area was previously crime-free, but 2 weeks before Amanda's death, a house in the neighborhood was robbed. It's possible that the same person was involved in Amanda's murder. The neighbor suggested that the perpetrator might have seen Amanda's brother, Nate, go for a run, then broken into their house. If Amanda witnessed the break-in, the robber might have shot her to silence her. To explore this theory, the investigators needed evidence to determine whether a botched robbery led to Amanda's death. Typically, burglars who are caught by homeowners will go to great lengths to prevent them from calling the police. However, in this case, nothing was taken from the Anderson home, and Amanda's room was left undisturbed. Amanda's home was burgled, but the thief didn't take anything valuable, including jewelry and a laptop. Amanda's father, Mark, checked the house and confirmed that nothing was missing. This led the investigators to question whether the break-in was actually a robbery gone wrong. The forensic team searched Amanda's room and the entire house for evidence, collecting fingerprints and hair samples that didn't belong to Amanda or her family. They also took the clothes Nate wore when he found Amanda's body, even though they didn't have any visible bloodstains. This was consistent with Nate's 911 call, in which he said he hadn't touched anything. The police still sent the clothes to the lab for further analysis, along with other evidence. To begin their investigation, the police first had to rule out Amanda's family members as potential suspects. They asked her father, Mark Anderson, to show them all the weapons in their house, which was a common practice in Texas. Although the Andersons weren't avid hunters, they did occasionally practice shooting. Following Mark's directions, the police found and seized over 10 different types of pistols, rifles, and revolvers from the house. With no clear motives or suspects, the police explored the possibility of criminal gang involvement, but they quickly dismissed it. Their informants also didn't provide any useful information. 2 days after her death, on September 17, 2010, the police received the autopsy report, which revealed that Amanda had been shot 4 times in the head. What was especially puzzling was that every shot would have been fatal, yet the perpetrator had continued to pull the trigger 3 more times. The unusual location and direction of the bullet wounds on Amanda's head raised suspicions. The attacker used a small caliber pistol, firing from a distance of at least a yard away, as there were no gunpowder marks around the wounds. 2 wounds were located on top of her head, one near the right temple and one on her forehead, with all shots entering from top to bottom, except for one shot to the right temple that entered at a right angle. This suggested a deliberate and controlled attack, more like an execution. Forensic analysis led investigators to believe that Amanda knew her killer. They based this conclusion on 2 key facts. Firstly, Amanda was sitting on her bed, occupied with her laptop, when she was shot, indicating that she felt comfortable and safe in the presence of the attacker. Secondly, the fact that the attacker was standing next to her suggests a level of familiarity and intimacy. If Amanda had not known the person, she would likely have reacted or taken action when they entered her room, but she did not, implying that she trusted the perpetrator and did not anticipate the attack. Detectives investigating Amanda's death questioned her college friends, learning she was cautious and avoided strangers, drugs, and criminals. Her best friend confirmed she had no enemies on campus. Despite this, they considered that someone might have secretly targeted her. Reviewing college security footage and reports from the past year, they searched for suspicious incidents, but found nothing useful. The police revisited the Anderson family to inquire about Amanda's personal life, suspecting a personal motive behind the brutal crime due to the multiple wounds. Amanda's mother was baffled by the incident, describing her daughter as a kind and diligent student who regularly attended church. Although Amanda didn't have a boyfriend at the time of her death, her mother revealed that she had met someone about a year prior, but their relationship ended. The police sought out this individual to learn more about his connection with Amanda and the reasons behind their breakup. Upon questioning, the man revealed that he and Amanda shared some classes and occasionally went to the movies with friends, but they never developed a romantic relationship. They had gone out together a few times, but it didn't progress further. When asked about the last time he saw Amanda, he stated that it was the day before her murder. The police started their investigation again from the beginning, re-examining all the evidence. They focused on Nate's 911 call, which was the starting point of the case. During the call, Nate claimed he didn't enter his sister's room and that someone had shot Amanda. The investigators realized it was impossible for someone standing in the doorway to know Amanda was shot in the head, or how many times, without entering the room. The police revisited the Anderson house and inspected the door, which Nate said was opened when he got home. Although there were scratches on the door, the lock was intact, leading the police to believe someone was trying to make it look like the door was kicked in. The crime lab analyzed the weapons found in the Anderson house and concluded that one of the pistols was likely the weapon used to shoot Amanda. After a thorough investigation, detectives reached a conclusion. All evidence pointed to a family member as Amanda's killer. The murder weapon, a pistol, was hidden in a secure location, suggesting the killer knew exactly where to find it. Moreover, the killer returned the gun to its hiding place after the crime. On the night of the murder, Amanda's parents had solid alibis. Her father was dining with a friend, and her mother was at work. This left only Amanda and her 15-year-old brother Nate in the house. To find answers, investigators delved deeper into the events of that evening. It turned out that Amanda's father, Mark, had called her to remind her to pick up her mother from work. 12 minutes later, Mark received a call from Nate, who was crying and claimed someone had shot Amanda. However, this call raised a disturbing question. Why did Nate call his father before calling emergency services, unless he was trying to cover his tracks after murdering his own sister? The police required solid proof before making any accusations, as they didn't want to cause further distress to Amanda and Nate's parents. To gather more information, the investigators decided to question Mark Anderson, Nate's father, without directly accusing his son of involvement. During the conversation, Nate's parents became aware that the police suspected their son. When asked about Nate's recent use of the .22 caliber pistol, Mark revealed that he had given the gun to Nate a few days before Amanda's death, and that Nate had fired it in their backyard. The officers went back to the Anderson house and found .22 caliber casings in the backyard that matched the bullets found in Amanda's body. While this was suspicious, it wasn't conclusive evidence. However, 2 weeks later, a crucial clue was found. Nate's clothes, which he wore when he claimed to have found his sister dead, were tested with luminol, revealing traces of blood. Further analysis by a national blood spatter expert suggested that Nate was either in the room when the shooting occurred or was the one who fired the fatal shots. The tests confirmed that his clothes had Amanda's blood on them. Despite this, the Anderson siblings seemed to have a loving relationship. Photos showed them being affectionate, and their parents described them as best friends who often made videos together, including one just days before Amanda's death. The police were left wondering what could have driven Nate to commit such a heinous act. On November 10, 2010, police arrested Nate Anderson at a church, suspecting him of murdering his own sister. The accusation shocked everyone who knew him, as it seemed out of character. The trial began on October 24, 2011, and was an emotionally challenge for the Anderson family. Despite the evidence presented against Nate, his family remains supportive and refuses to believe he is capable of such a crime. According to his grandmother, Dolores Anderson, Nate is a kind and innocent boy who would never harm his sister. His parents, too, are adamant that he is not responsible for Amanda's death. For his mother, Stacy Anderson, the whole ordeal has been a nightmare. She is still adjusting to the loss of her daughter and now has to cope with her son's arrest. Mark expressed his outrage and disbelief at the accusation that his son killed his sister Amanda. The brutality of the crime, including the fact that Amanda was shot 4 times, has led Mark to conclude that Nate could not have committed the crime. Initially, Mark had some doubts about Nate's involvement, but once he learned about the 4 gunshots, he became convinced of his son's innocence. Mark is critical of the authorities, accusing them of ignoring evidence that exonerates Nate, and instead focusing on evidence that supports their own case. He feels that they have already made up their minds about Nate's guilt, despite the fact that an expert had recommended that Nate be tried in juvenile court, not adult court. After Amanda's death, investigators found evidence in the Anderson home that shed light on the case. Prosecutors discovered that Nate's computer had a history of visits to adult websites and violent drawings. Furthermore, a text message on Amanda's phone mentioned someone should be shot, but the context indicated it was a joke about Nate not helping with chores and playfully shooting staples at Amanda. An expert testified that this evidence could be a motive for the crime. However, Nate's attorney argued that the evidence was not unusual or incriminating. Ultimately, Nate accepted a plea deal in February 2012 and pleaded guilty to a first-degree crime. He confessed to a psychologist and his parents that he had killed Amanda. In a statement, Nate and Amanda's parents shared Nate's confession. According to Mark Anderson, Nate told him that he shot Amanda with a pistol found in their home and asked for forgiveness, which he granted. Stacy, the mother, expressed the immense difficulty she experienced as a mother who loves both her children. Nate Anderson has been sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. His attorney believes that agreeing to the plea deal was in Nate's best interest, as neither Nate nor his family wanted the case to go to trial. Regarding the motive behind the crime, Nate's attorneys declined to provide details, saying only that they know what happened and are choosing not to discuss it further. However, they did reveal that Nate has shown remorse for his actions, has asked for forgiveness, and has received it. The attorneys described the process of coming to terms with what happened as difficult and emotional. The authorities have determined that the incident was a hate crime, as there was no evidence of any other trauma. According to the Smith County Sheriff's Office, Nate will be eligible to apply for parole in 2 years. The case of Jaden Parkinson. Jaden Parkinson was born on September 26, 1996, in Folkestone, UK, as the youngest of 3 siblings in a troubled family. Her parents' relationship was marked by discord. Jaden's mother, Samantha, recounts that her children were exposed to unsettling experiences. When Jaden was just 7 years old, her parents divorced, and she initially lived with her father. Despite this, she maintained a close bond with her mother, with whom she would talk every night over the phone. As Jaden entered her teenage years, her lifestyle became increasingly turbulent. According to Samantha, Jaden's father gave her excessive freedom, which led to her involvement with a crowd that encouraged smoking and alcohol consumption. Jaden would periodically live with her father and then with her mother. At the age of 13, she ran away from home, seeking refuge with her mother and expressing a desire to live with her. Ultimately, the family court ruled in favor of Jaden's wish, allowing her to stay with her mother. Jaden had a difficult time at school, often clashing with teachers and resenting attempts to control her behavior. In her personal life, she was in a romantic relationship with Ben Blakely, whom she met at 14. Despite their significant age difference, Ben was 20, Jaden's mother was unable to intervene. Initially, Jaden and Ben's relationship was loving and romantic, but it gradually became strained and controlling. Ben exerted significant influence over Jaden's life, dictating her appearance, including what clothes she wore and whether she wore makeup. He also isolated her from her family and friends, causing Jaden to move out of her mother's house and into a hostel for women escaping domestic violence. Ben exerted total control over Jaden's life, despite being banned from her hostel. They frequently argued, and the hostel staff were even warned about Ben's aggressive behavior towards her. Jaden was trapped, needing his permission to do anything. Ben took away her phone, convincing her that she only needed him and his love. Ben dictated who Jaden could talk to, forbidding her from interacting with men. He monitored her social media, and she eventually stopped attending school. His grip on her life was so tight that he even restricted her from leaving her room to use the toilet. Jaden's daily phone calls with her mother dwindled to just 1 or 2 conversations per month. Jaden's mother, Samantha, pleaded with her to return home and end the toxic relationship, but Jaden refused. Ben's control over Jaden was both psychological and physical. She was often seen with bruises on her face. On November 30th, 2013, Jaden called her mother to reveal that she was pregnant. Jaden hoped that having a child would change Ben's attitude towards her and his lifestyle for the better. She thought the baby would bring them closer together and that Ben would go back to being the person she fell in love with. However, Ben did not live up to her expectations. Instead, he revealed his true nature once he had complete control over Jaden. He manipulated her into isolating herself from her friends and family, making her financially dependent on him. He even went so far as to restrict her movements, not allowing her to leave her room, even to use the toilet. Meanwhile, Ben was dating other girls behind her back, controlling them psychologically and physically as well. When Jaden's mother, Samantha, found out about her pregnancy, she asked Jaden to come back home, but Jaden refused, not wanting to cause her mother any more trouble. When Jaden told Ben about her pregnancy, he became angry and denied being the father of her child. Before she vanished, Jaden was being threatened by Ben, who claimed he would post intimate photos and videos of her on social media. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Jaden reported Ben to the authorities, fearing he would follow through on his threat. At the time, Ben possessed 30 explicit photos and 13 videos of Jaden, which she desperately wanted to keep private. On December 3rd, Jaden failed to return to her hostel, prompting staff to launch a search. Given their awareness of Jaden's personal issues, they contacted her mother, Samantha, by phone, but she was unable to provide any information about her daughter's whereabouts. A missing persons report was filed with the police just after midnight on December 4th, 2013. After learning about Jaden's tumultuous personal life, investigators reached out to Ben to see if he had any information about her disappearance. However, he was hostile and hung up on them multiple times, claiming he couldn't assist and had no idea where Jaden might be. Jaden had a troubled upbringing and frequently clashed with her family, even running away from home on several occasions. Given this history, her initial disappearance didn't raise immediate red flags during the investigation. On December 4th, police arrested Ben Blakely, but it wasn't related to Jaden's disappearance. Instead, Jaden had previously reported Ben to the police, fearing he would post intimate photos of her online. The investigators who spoke with Ben were unaware that he was also a person of interest in Jaden's disappearance case. After being arrested, Ben denied plans to share Jaden's photos online and was released on bail that same day. Samantha, Jaden's mother, took action by distributing flyers with her daughter's picture and using social media to raise awareness about her disappearance, hoping someone had information about her whereabouts. Meanwhile, the police reviewed surveillance footage to track Jaden's last known movements. They obtained CCTV footage from her hostel, which showed her leaving to meet Ben, but not returning. This was on December 3rd. Further investigation revealed that Jaden was next spotted at Oxford railway station, where CCTV footage captured her walking in with Ben. The footage didn't show anything suspicious. By tracing their journey, investigators discovered that Ben and Jaden took a train to Didcot, a town about 10 miles from Oxford. The last known location of Jaden was at the train station in Didcot, where footage showed her and Ben exiting the building. Jaden would typically reach out to her family within a day or two after running away from home to let them know she was safe. However, this time was different. Despite the passing days, Jaden failed to contact her family or friends, and her social media accounts remained inactive. The CCTV footage showing her boarding a train with Ben made him the prime suspect in her disappearance. The police were convinced that Ben knew Jaden's whereabouts and what had happened to her. The footage also revealed Ben returning to the train station alone, but Jaden was never seen alive again. On December 10th, 2013, a week after her disappearance, the police arrested Ben Blakely. The investigators wanted to question Ben to determine what had happened to Jaden after they left the train station in Didcot together. At the time, the police considered two possibilities. Jaden might be hiding, or Ben could be holding her against her will. During the interrogation, Ben was very confident in his responses. He claimed to have no knowledge of his ex-girlfriend Jaden's whereabouts, stating that they had broken up and she had moved on to a new relationship. According to Ben, the police should focus their investigation on her new boyfriend. Ben showed a lack of concern for Jaden's safety, saying he didn't care what happened to her now that they were no longer together and he had a new girlfriend. He suggested that the police check her social media accounts to track her location and identify who she was interacting with. Despite Jaden still being missing, Ben was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and murder. The police then interviewed Jaden's friends to see if they had any information about her possible whereabouts. However, their investigations revealed that Jaden had become estranged from her friends after starting her relationship with Ben, and therefore, no one knew of a potential hideout. A crucial break in the search for Jaden came when a taxi driver from Didcot contacted investigators. He reported that on December 4th, around 1 a.m., he picked up a young man on a dirt road who was struggling with a large, heavy suitcase covered in mud. The passenger needed help lifting the bag into the taxi, which raised the driver's suspicions about its contents and whether he might have unknowingly witnessed a crime. Further investigation revealed that the passenger had called the taxi using Ben Blakely's mobile phone. When police questioned Ben about this new evidence, he refused to answer any more questions. Analysis of his phone's location records showed that Ben had been to several locations in Didcot, including an abandoned barn in the countryside, which became a key area of interest in the case. The team of investigators, comprising criminologists and dog handlers, visited the location where a taxi had picked up Ben that night to conduct an investigation. It was later discovered that Ben and Jaden had previously been to this area, as Jaden's mother resided in Didcot, which is located near the barn. The police discovered a bracelet similar to Jaden's near the barn. Trained service dogs reacted as if they'd found a body inside, but Jaden's body wasn't there. This led the police to suspect that a suitcase, possibly containing Jaden's body, was involved. The police asked the public to come forward if they'd seen a man carrying a large suitcase in the Didcot area. Meanwhile, they conducted door-to-door interviews with nearby residents. Surveillance footage from the train station showed that Ben and Jaden didn't have a suitcase with them. Investigators were determined to find out where Ben got the suitcase, but they also considered the possibility that the man seen with the suitcase by the taxi driver wasn't actually Ben. On December 14th, the police found a crucial lead in their investigation. Ben Blakely's grandmother, grandfather, and younger brother Jake lived near the abandoned barn where the mysterious events unfolded. When the police arrived at their doorstep, Ben's grandmother immediately asked, "Are you here about the suitcase?" The grandmother explained that Ben had borrowed a suitcase from her a few days prior, hurriedly emptying its contents on the floor without explanation. He returned the suitcase 2 days later, but it was dirty. Additionally, she reported that 2 shovels had gone missing and reappeared, covered in a thick layer of dirt. The presence of the dirt-covered shovels raised suspicions that Ben may not have acted alone. Moreover, Jake, Ben's 17-year-old brother, was revealed to be a friend of Jaden's, which hinted at a potential connection between them. Witnesses reported seeing Ben and Jake riding dirt bikes together around the time the police were searching for Jaden. The police arrested Jake Blakely on suspicion of being involved in the crime. They sent the suitcase Ben had returned to his grandmother's barn to a laboratory for analysis to see if it had any traces of Jaden's DNA. Based on the evidence, investigators developed a theory that Jaden was killed in an abandoned barn, then placed in a suitcase and taken to another location where she was buried. However, searching the vast fields surrounding Didcot made finding her body a daunting task. To aid in the investigation, the police used aerial photography to identify 10 areas where the soil surface had recently been disturbed. They checked several locations, but didn't find Jaden's body until they had searched all 10 areas of interest. A significant development occurred in the case when Jake Blakely began cooperating with the police. He directed them to investigate his uncle's grave at a local cemetery in Didcot, near the All Saints Church. Although the cemetery was one of 10 locations that had recently shown signs of surface disturbance, it was initially considered a low priority since such changes are not unusual in a cemetery setting. However, after receiving a note from Jake Blakely suggesting that Jaden's body might be buried in his uncle's grave, the police cordoned off the cemetery. This was a completely new and unprecedented tactic in hiding a victim's body, and it drew widespread media attention. Ben and Jake Blakely's uncle had been buried in 2006, and the forensic team set up a tent in the cemetery to conduct their investigation. After some time, they made the grim discovery. Jaden's body was found in the grave, naked, with no clothes or jewelry present. This was the first time in the country that a victim's body had been hidden in an existing grave. An examination by forensic experts revealed that Jaden was beaten before her death, with evidence of strangulation and finger marks on her neck. The official cause of death was asphyxia, as determined by the pathologist. While in prison awaiting trial, Ben Blakely had a change of heart after speaking with the prison chaplain. He wrote a letter, along with his lawyer, admitting responsibility for Jaden's death. Ben claimed that the crime was not planned, stating that he pushed Jaden during an argument, causing her to fall from a nearby bridge. He attempted to revive her but was unsuccessful. Initially, he buried her body in one location, but later moved it to his uncle's grave in the cemetery. However, the autopsy contradicted his story, showing blunt force injuries to her face and asphyxia as the cause of death. With no signs of a fall from a height, it meant Ben Blakely was dishonest to avoid responsibility for his actions. However, the truth came to light during the trial, which started on June 23, 2014, after Jaden's father had passed away due to heart problems. Blakely showed no remorse for taking the lives of Jaden and her unborn child. Instead, he behaved defiantly, shouting insults and displaying his indifference. Throughout the 4-week trial, it became clear that Blakely was a violent and controlling boyfriend. 3 of his ex-girlfriends testified that he had been abusive to them, taking their phones, hitting them, and choking them if they answered back, or if he suspected them of cheating. Blakely's short temper was on full display during the trial. He frequently outbursted in anger, using foul language in the courtroom and shouting at the prosecutor, Richard Lean. The judge repeatedly warned him about his behavior, but it was too much for Jaden's mother and other family members, who were often forced to leave the courtroom in tears. Judge Patrick Eccles was shocked by Ben's behavior, so he sent him to the cells and continued the trial without him for a day. Although Jake Blakely is under 18, Judge Eccles allowed his name to be published because it was in the public's best interest. Jake has admitted to trying to disrupt the legal process, but claimed he thought he was burying weapons or dead animals at the time. Ben promised his sibling Jake an Xbox and £100 to commit the crime. CCTV footage showed Ben and Jaden taking a train to Didcot, then Jake returning alone, hiding his face. The prosecutor said it was a planned crime, with Jake luring Jaden to a secluded spot to kill him. Blakely took Jaden to an abandoned barn in another town after finding out she was pregnant, likely because he wanted to control her and didn't want to become a father. Jaden wanted to start a new life, but Blakely wouldn't let her go. Jaden's mother, Samantha, supported creating a domestic violence registry in an interview with Sky News. She recalled how Blakely manipulated and controlled Jaden, getting money from her, and said she thought she was his target, not Jaden. The jury deliberated for 20 hours before reaching a verdict. Ben Blakely was guilty of intentionally killing Jaden Parkinson. The judge emphasized that Jake Blakely's abusive behavior towards Jaden involved physical and emotional mistreatment during their relationship. Blakely controlled every aspect of Jaden's daily life, taking away her phone to isolate her from others. When she was living at a hostel, he forced her to stay in her room, even restricting her access to the bathroom. The judge pointed out that Jaden was deeply emotionally attached to Blakely, making it challenging for her to break free from the toxic relationship. Finally, in November last year, Jaden found the courage to end the relationship. In response, Blakely threatened to post intimate photos of her online to humiliate her. The court sentenced Jake Blakely to 3 years in prison for attempting to pervert the course of justice in July 2014. His older brother, Ben Blakely, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 20 years.